Mark Blaisdell will go last. He's on his way. So Janet, I'll give you 5 to 7 minutes.
Thank you, Janet. Mr. Osborne, thank you for those prayers. I am always humbled to know that there are people out there praying for what we do. It's pretty humbling, and thank you for what you do. There's a whole bunch to talk about, and luckily you've got experts here. They know all. Let me just tell you what I did in Finance and Claims Committee in the Senate when Senator Vincent presented Senate Bill 262, the bill that ratifies the compact. It isn't the compact. It was the bill to ratify the compact. He told me I couldn't amend it, and I have the right to amend any bill in that legislature.
Right.
He told me the place to amend it is in the budget bill. There isn't any money in it, in the budget. There had been $8 million that had been taken out by the budget committee, so there wasn't even a venue for me to amend it. And here's what my amendment said. An audit of the $55 million that the Montana taxpayers are putting in, and a report to the Interim Finance Committee of the spending of the $55 million. Everybody, most of the legislators on the Finance and Claims Committee liked my amendments. They voted for my amendment. Chaz said, Senator Vincent said that the bill couldn't be amended, that I was doing it as a maneuver to kill the bill. Well, this was Tuesday. There's no such maneuver. We suspended rules and voted away our second, third reading. So there was really, that was not, his problem was that he was mad. He had worked it and thought he had the whole thing already done, locked and done out of Finance and Claims. So he was so angry that those amendments went on that on the floor he blasted the bill, which meant that the bill came out without my amendments. Then on the floor he said he'd be willing to work with me to put those amendments on in the House in the Budget Committee. Well, there's no spending. And in his bill on page 50, there's $55 million promised to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribe. And so I can't imagine why anyone would think that any legislator wouldn't have the right to amend that. And in fact, I think Senator Keenan voted for both of my amendments, didn't you, Senator Keenan?
Yay.
All right.
She's a tough act to follow. Thanks, Janet. We'll see you.
Thank you for all you do.
And if any of you want to, if you're bored today and you want to, for the next couple of days, come to my house, do taxes with me. It'd be great. I'd really appreciate it. So where is the bill now? It's going on the compact. The bill is headed for the House. We're in a period that's called transmittal, which means that the bills that were passed in the Senate go over to the House. The bills that were passed in the House go over to the Senate. So that bill was passed out of the Senate, comes to the House. It will begin in a committee in Judiciary, which is, the chairman of that is Jerry Bennett from over in Libby. He's opposed to it. We may have the votes to kill it in the committee. Is that a good thing?
Amen.
Yeah,
sure, it is.
Amen.
But you have to remember that just because a bill gets killed in the committee doesn't mean that it's dead. It means that it can get blasted to the floor for a vote on the floor. And I don't know where they got the word blasted, but that's actually what it is. So my guess is it's going to wind up working its way through the process just like it did in the Senate. We don't know today whether we've got enough votes to kill it on the House floor, which leaves it up to you guys. It means phone calls. It means really searching out who the people are that are on the fence and making those phone calls, talking to them and saying, hey, this is a forever bill. This is a bill that
See, he doesn't like it.
Yeah, I don't blame him. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it is a forever bill, and it means that that if we pass that, there's no going back. It's money that we give away, federal government gives away, and we give it to a sovereign nation. So that's probably enough said on the compact. You know where I am on it. I've got 3 rivers that go through my district, all of them directly impacted by the compact.
You're doing a great job, Randy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Keenan. I'm in the State Senate. I'm from Big Fork. I will leave most of my time for questions. I like responding to questions a lot more than doing monologues. The compact we've covered. I have some big concerns with that. It's $1.255 billion that the tribe will get on this deal. Of course, the community bank of Ronan sent me an email, and they were very much in support of it. I wonder why. But I'm on the Senate Finance and Claims Committee. I think the most interesting thing we have coming down is I was in the legislature for 12 years. I've been gone for 8, and now I'm back. It's a different place. I love the Capitol. I love the beehive of activity. I love the people that are there. They're all communicators. They're all good personalities. But state government has changed dramatically in the last 10 or 12 years. The agencies are in charge. The executive branch is in charge. I used to do the DPA, the Department of Public Health and Human Services budget, and I worked very well with that department. There were 6 of us on the subcommittee, and we would intimately work with the budget, solving problems for people that can't take care of themselves, people that fall in a ditch. Where you draw that line is the difference between the conservatives and the liberals and all of that. But we were able to work together, and this time we came down there and they had a 12.3% increase in the budget over the previous session. They wanted 18% more money in general fund. They had all kinds of new programs. And like the compact, it was take it or leave it. There was no negotiations, no bargaining, no discussions of anything. They had their program, they had their budget, and that's the way it was going to be. So I tried for about 3 weeks to communicate with them, and then I gave up and just started voting no continuously. Now, to get to a revenue estimate for the next 2 years so that we can build a budget, and that's a tax committee project, if you will. Now, and Keith can tell us about what happened to the revenue estimate. It used to be 12, 15 years ago that we would be, between the governor's budget office and the legislative fiscal division, we'd be somewhere about $25 million off. And you could negotiate to see where you were going to have a revenue estimate so that you could then build the budget. Then I guess over the last few years it's been about $50 million difference. Well, the difference as of Thursday was $359 million. The governor's budget office thinks that we're going to have somewhere between 7 and 8% growth in the economy over the next 2 years. The legislative fiscal division is thinking that's going to be about 4%. Now, that difference of 4% over 2 years is a big number, $359 million. So I don't know how that's going to be reconciled. In the Department of Public Health and Human Services, of course, we had caseload projections for Medicaid, for instance, that were huge, and yet the governor's budget office is telling us that we're sailing down to a good economy. So those things don't jive. If they think we're going to get big budget increases for Medicaid and at the same time tell us that we're out of a bad economy and we're sliding, then something doesn't jive there. And so I'm looking forward to that discussion. But other than that, I'll leave time for questions.
I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I am Keith Regier, represent from House District 4, that's the area between Kalispell, Columbia Falls, and I have the honor of serving as the majority leader in the House this session. We do have a 59-41 majority in the House, Republicans. In the Senate, it's 29-21. Got a lot that I could talk to you about. First of all, your messages, we get them.
Yeah.
Emails, phones, we get them. And some of you I've been able to answer. Others, I mean, there's some days I get 500-600 of them. I mean, if I try to answer all of them, I just couldn't do it. So don't think that we don't hear you. Keep them coming, and we value your input.
Well, good afternoon. I won't take very much time because I don't know what all they said. I was at the crossroads at the DMV line, you know, where you get halfway up, your number's almost there, and you don't know if you should leave or not. So I'll defer to questions from the audience instead of getting into a lot of things if they've already been discussed.
Bill 262 goes over to the House and the Judiciary Committee. Will that be allowed to be passed out of the House Judiciary Committee on an adverse committee report? And so it might require a higher majority in order to pass off through the floor?
Yes, my hope would be, we don't have anybody sitting on the panel up here that's on judiciary at the, oh, you are, oh, let me pass that over to this guy.
Short answer is yes.
Clarice.
It's awfully hard for me to ask a simple question about a complex bill like 262, which has gone far beyond water for Indians on a reservation. I wonder if the bulk of the legislators can comprehend what forever means when they are giving consent to the protection of the citizens, to the rule of a government on the reservation, another government. And if they also see the link between water and land and the value of land and the fact that if federal government gets it, it's taken out of production, and if it gets out of production, it's our tax base. So it's the economy. Silly.
Stupid. So what's the question?
The question is how do you inform people? I know you're all conservatives. How can you get this complex message through? It's so much linked in 1,600 pages.
Part of it is just, you know, just take a few hours or less even, and this is the bill. Now it's not printed on one side here. It's got 2 pages on each side, double-sided, and it's but if it were one sheet, it'd be 140 pages long. But all you have to do is start looking through it, and there's an appropriation. Of course, appropriation bills start in the House. They don't start in the Senate. But this one had a fiscal note of $8 million. That's the beginning of the $55 million. It started in the Senate. So it's a violation of the legislative rules right off the bat. There's some things I can point out, but all you have to do is just kind of read it with your ears up a little bit. You can see it. This is the point that I brought up on the floor. Page 14, Flathead Lake. The tribes have the right to all naturally occurring water necessary to maintain the level of the entirety of Flathead Lake at an elevation of 2883. Well, I know what 2883 means. That's low pool. That's with the sandy beach and all of that. That's April, before the snow melt. So I asked, what about 2893, which is July and August, for recreation, tourism, fisheries, the whole works? And I never did get an answer. I also asked about Article 5, Section 11, paren 5, where in the legislature, that's Article 5, Section 11 is bills, paren 5 says that the legislature has no authority to appropriate any state asset to a private corporation. I mean, that's my short version of 3 sentences or whatever. But we're appropriating a state asset to a private corporation. But it's not a private corporation. It's a sovereign nation. It's, you know, it's whatever you want it to be to answer the question, the challenge that you get. You get further in here, and I found here's the co-owner, the tribes, and their co-owner is 7 times it's mentioned on page 15. Upon the effective date, the tribes shall be added as a co-owner with Montana Fish Wildlife Parks, water right number 76L, blah, 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 blah. The tribe shall be added in an expeditious manner as co-owner to any water right with a fish or fish and wildlife purpose. That is, co-owner, co-owner, co-owner. So this is giving the Salish and Kootenai tribe co-ownership with a tremendous amount of our assets. You just go through this bill, and you know, I read it, and a lot of it is gobbledygook. But there's going to be a compact management committee. You know, all of these committees that are put together, we're dead in the water. The makeup of the committee, the director of the DNRC is going to be one of 3. The tribes will have the tribal council chairman or his appointee, and then the federal government's going to have somebody. Well, we lose 2-1 there, I can guarantee you. Anyway, the answer is just, you know, get online or whatever and just read through this bill, and you just pick out words that are very alarming. When you get into the latter part of the bill, every state section of statute, there's a, you know, I got to find it because it's, you see it on and on and on over and over again. Here it is. At the end of, in Chapter 85 is water law for the most part, and so this compact has the tribes exempt from the Montana Environmental Protection Act, which came out of the early 70s. It's also exempt from the Major Facility Siting Act. So, you know, it may sound ridiculous, but things that may sound ridiculous now might be a reality in 20, 30 years. And I worry more about what this compact's going to mean in 20 or 30 years. When we're all gone. But at the end of all of these sections in 85, a new section or subsection has been added. Pursuant to Section 2, the provisions of this section do not apply within the exterior boundaries of the Flathead Indian Reservation. In other words, within the boundaries of the reservation, they are exempt from state water law. Across the board, it goes on for pages and pages and pages. Pursuant to Section 2, the provisions of this section do not apply within the exterior boundaries of the Flathead Indian Reservation. So we're giving away, you know, that's a mouthful, but we're giving away a huge state asset. It's unconstitutional on its face, but we don't need to worry about that.
So let me ask the follow-up question on that. It's gone from, so I mean, most of you guys are very aware of this, but it's gone through the Senate. The vote was 31-19. So this is the transmittal break. It transfers over to the House. What, I guess send it down to House guys, what's kind of the timeline and or process for public input for folks that are here to go down and give their 2 cents? It's probably now worth 1 cent. That's not even worth anything. For you guys to kind of listen to what's the process. I mean, how does that work?
It has not been assigned to a committee yet, and it just passed the Senate before transmittal, so it will be assigned a committee, and then the chairman will set a date. We have had some discussion about a possible Saturday meeting so that we can accommodate all the people that come. It'll be a lot better that way, so that might happen. We'll have to adjust staff a little bit that way. I'd like to point out that the bill that Senator Keenan was reading from, the very first whereas, says that the tribe, whereas the tribe reserved the reservation for themselves. I have no idea where they got that from. I mean, if you read the Hellgate Treaty, they ceded everything to the federal government. So they're starting with the very first line is wrong. I don't think we fully answered Ms. Ryan's questions, though. How do you get through to these people? The short answer is you can't. Liberals, conservatives, two different mindset. The liberals truly have a socialistic herd mentality. What's good for the group, I've got to get in line there. They see things from an emotional standpoint. Republicans are more, conservatives are more independent, self-sufficient, and we look at things logically and try to leave the emotion out. And it's the emotion that can get us into trouble, whether we're impulse buying or impulsively voting for legislation that sounds good on the surface. I had a conversation with some Democrats a couple sessions ago about the national debt and spending, and I said, how much debt will it take before you get upset about the spending? And they looked at me like I was crazy. They just shrugged their shoulders. I mean, there's basically no limit. They're not afraid of the debt. It doesn't compute. So maybe that answers your question.
Sorry, but it does.
I have a question, perhaps not, you know, it's maybe for the state, for the Supreme Court. I have never heard of this in perpetuity, this forever word in any kind of legislation. Have you? Is it a common thing? I mean, except for this one. Is that in the first place? Then my question really is, can that word be dealt with in a constitutional amendment that would perhaps be passed by the citizens of this state? I'm asking, and perhaps that's a question for the Supreme Court or something.
I can say that time immemorial and in perpetuity are new to me in the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
With this bill.
Yeah. You hear the advertisements, you hear the different people's names attached to it, different groups attached to it. It's about the money or it's about power. And in this case, I'd say it's primarily about the money. And you can put a whole lot of advertising when you're looking at $1.1 billion. You can put a lot of money into the risk of advertising, and with the belief that it will be effective, and it is. And you can hear people talking about that. The Hellgate Treaty is 6 pages. That's it. You hear folks say this is based on the Hellgate Treaty. The Hellgate Treaty does not say water in it anywhere. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it is, we are depending on you to talk to the folks that haven't made up their minds, to research them out. If you have to call every one of them, if you got to call me 50 times, call me 50 times. My mind's made up. It was made up when I read the Hellgate Treaty. And if you haven't read the Hellgate Treaty, look it up online, read it. It's 6 pages. It's very easy to read, and it doesn't give these kind of rights. But when you look at an opportunity to make bank, you can get pretty greedy real fast, and that's what's happening. And it's not just the tribes. Okay, you'll see the different groups that are supporting it. Follow the money.
Yeah. 262 does have a fiscal note, and it's $8 million. Why, I don't know. It doesn't say $55 million, but you know, the governor's budget office. These are, you know, a lot of times Republican bills are death by fiscal note because the agencies in the governor's office makes the fiscal notes, and they can kill a bill with the fiscal note, but the sponsors have an option to redo and do their own sponsor's fiscal note, if you will. But, you know, I don't know if the process now would include the House saying, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Let's have a joint rules committee meeting and decide if this bill is legally before us.
I think the honest answer is it had more of a chance to go through the Senate, and it did.
It's a great question. Oh.
And I'll just add on to that. Keep in mind the $8 million, if they don't appropriate it in the House and this compact passes, it doesn't mean it's null and void just because the $8 million that's on that fiscal note that's, you know, magically may appear. It's been taken out of the governor's budget when it was there. What happens though is if this compact passes, it obligates the state, if they're going to live up to their contractual obligation with this, that they have to come up with $55 million at some point in time within 5 years after ratification by Congress. So even if 262 passes, the $8 million doesn't get funded anywhere in the budget, anywhere in any kind of amendment, the state's still obligated at some point in time if this is to be ratified and we've gone through everything that is there. So that was made very open at the Finance Committee meeting, was that, you know, no, it's not in there. We don't know where it's going to get put in. But I think that was part of it, was let's try to get it through the Senate first. That's the easier roadblock. If it stumbles, we have a backup plan. I believe Dan Solomon has a backup bill. And if that stumbles, I believe Steve Fitzpatrick's got one to push the filing deadline on to 2017 under LC, and it's ready to be picked up as well. So
And
I think there's 3 different paths there. So
ultimately, the courts.
What about the
and
MIPA?
conservatives don't do well in court.
What about the MIPA, though, for the 13 million that's talks about fish habitat, etc.? Part of the 55 million. And can legislature call for that?
Yeah, I don't see that on this list. You know,
well, what we're being told on those things is just like some of those amendments is the compact bill is not the proper place to have that because of the fact that then it would force them all to come back and agree. So if we want that, we're told that we have to put it in House Bill 2 with the restriction language there. That's similar to what was told to Jana about hers on the reporting requirements. It doesn't need to be in the compact, it needs to be in with the appropriation.
For me, it's game time. It's game time with the compact. The talking is over. I mean, we just need to get on and deal with it.
Thank you guys for coming down. There's